My name is Bridget C. DuPont, and I was 30 years old when my father begged me to fly 6 hours for Christmas, only to inform me at the door that I was not invited on the family vacation. I was half asleep when he called at 6 in the morning. Seeing Dad's name on my screen made my stomach tighten. Calls from him were never simply about how I was doing. There was always a request hidden somewhere beneath the greeting. "Still," I answered. "Bridget," he said, his voice softer than usual, "could you come to Seattle for the holidays? Everyone will be together this year. It would mean a lot to us." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I booked a flight from Miami, rearranged several projects at work, rented a car, and bought gifts for my sister Vanessa's children. The entire trip cost far more than I wanted to admit. Dad told me not to rent a vehicle. I did anyway. Being prepared was what I did. It was who they had trained me to become. Whenever something went wrong, Bridget fixed it. Snow struck my face the moment I stepped outside SeaTac. Wet, heavy flakes clung to my hair and coat as I crossed toward the rental lot. The drive through Seattle felt longer than the flight. Every familiar street brought back the same uneasy thought. I was returning to a house that felt less like my childhood home and more like an investment I had never agreed to make. My parents lived there. Vanessa lived there with her children, but I paid for it. Mortgage contributions, electricity, internet, groceries, emergency repairs, and Vanessa's car payment all passed through my accounts. My parents always had an explanation for why their retirement income was not enough. Vanessa had not held a stable job in more than a year, but somehow her expenses remained everyone else's responsibility. When I reached the house, I carried my suitcase up the snowy walkway. Some foolish part of me expected a welcome, maybe a hug, maybe a thank you. Dad opened the door and looked directly at my suitcase. "You are going to babysit Vanessa's children," he said. "We are leaving for our family trip." No hello, no Merry Christmas. I remained on the porch. "What?" Vanessa appeared behind him carrying a duffel bag. Her 2 children were already wearing coats and running through the entryway. She laughed. "Try not to let them wipe their noses all over you, Bridget." Mom laughed from the kitchen. Dad smiled. They had flown me across the country to become unpaid childcare while they enjoyed a vacation I had helped finance. I never agreed to babysit. The laughter stopped slowly. Dad frowned. "Do not start. We already made the arrangements." "For everyone except me. You live in Miami," Mom called. "This is a chance for you to spend time with the children." Vanessa lifted one shoulder. "You always say you want to be more involved." I set my suitcase upright. "I came because Dad said the entire family would be together." "We will talk after the trip," Dad replied. "Right now, we need to leave." They expected me to surrender. They always did. Instead, I smiled. "You should probably check the resort reservation first." Vanessa's expression shifted. "What does that mean?" "It means the reservation was canceled 3 days ago." She laughed, as though I were bluffing, then opened the resort application on her phone. The color drained from her face. "No." Mom rushed over and looked at the screen. Dad stepped toward me. "What did you do?" "I canceled the booking and returned the money to the credit card in my name." "That was our vacation." "It was my money." Dad's face reddened. "The flights are still booked." "No, the travel credits were transferred to an account under my name." "You committed fraud?" "It is not fraud to control purchases made with my card." Vanessa began calling the resort. Mom asked the same questions repeatedly while Dad shouted about calling the police. I calmly removed a folded letter from my bag and placed it on the entry table. Dad glanced at it. "What is that?" "A notice from the mortgage company. I stopped the automatic payments 3 weeks ago." The house went completely silent. "You would not," Mom whispered. "I already did." Dad knocked over the coat rack as he stepped toward me. Then the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. I looked toward the door. "I would answer that. She is expecting you." Dad opened it. A tall woman stood outside holding a clipboard, an identification badge hanging from her coat. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Erin Caldwell with Child Protective Services. I'm here for the scheduled home assessment." Vanessa's phone slipped from her hand. And for the first time since I arrived, nobody was laughing. Aaron Caldwell stepped into the house with the calm, measured authority of someone accustomed to entering rooms filled with lies. I moved aside. Vanessa did not. She stood frozen near the entry table, still holding her phone as though the canceled reservation might somehow explain away the woman at the door. Dad recovered first. "There must be some mistake," he said. "We were not expecting anyone." Aaron glanced at her clipboard. This visit was scheduled after concerns were reported regarding the children's supervision and living conditions. Vanessa's face turned toward me. "You called CPS?" I reported what I saw. "What you saw?" she snapped. "You live across the country." I saw enough. 3 weeks earlier, during a video call, Vanessa had left both children outside without coats while she smoked on the porch and scrolled through her phone. One child had cried for nearly 10 minutes before she noticed. I had saved screenshots, dates, and messages. I had spent years covering financial damage. I was done covering neglect. Aaron stepped farther into the living room. "I need to inspect the common areas, food storage, and the children's sleeping arrangements." Vanessa suddenly transformed. Her shoulders straightened, her voice softened. "We were packing for a trip. That is why everything looks a little chaotic." The kitchen sink was buried beneath dishes. Empty wine bottles lined the counter. A sticky smear of peanut butter covered part of the dining room wall. One child sat on the floor eating chips for breakfast, while the other dragged a blanket through the hallway. "This is not normally how we live," Vanessa said quickly. Aaron wrote something down. "Who was supposed to supervise the children while you were away?" Vanessa pointed at me. "My sister." Aaron looked at me. "Did you agree to that?" "No." Dad stepped forward. "It was understood. Bridget always helps." "That is not the same as consent," Aaron replied. She asked whether Vanessa had any texts confirming the arrangement. Vanessa hesitated. I handed Aaron my phone. "The most recent message from Vanessa asked me to bring a specific shampoo from Miami. There was nothing about babysitting, nothing about dates, nothing about emergency information, nothing about permission." Aaron scrolled through the conversation, then returned my phone. Dad began explaining. He talked about stress, financial trouble, health concerns, retirement expenses, and family cooperation. He used every excuse except the truth. They had expected me to arrive, accept the children, and ask no questions. I opened my banking application. For the past 3 years, I have transferred money for this house, groceries, utilities, Vanessa's debts, and her car. Aaron looked at the records. Some months contained 5 figures in support. Her expression remained professional, but her questions became sharper. "Who currently earns income in this household?" Nobody answered immediately. Vanessa finally said she was looking for work. Dad mentioned retirement income. Mom said there had been unexpected expenses. Aaron went upstairs to inspect the children's room. The second she disappeared, Mom turned on me. "What is this really about?" I met her eyes. "Being used. You are destroying this family over hurt feelings." "No. Hurt feelings would have been forgetting to invite me on the trip. You flew me across the country under false pretenses so you could abandon 2 children with me." Vanessa crossed her arms. "They are your niece and nephew." "They are your responsibility." Dad's jaw tightened. "You always helped before, and you mistook that for ownership." The room fell silent. I told them I had already contacted the mortgage company. My name was being removed from future payments and account responsibility. If they wanted to keep the house, they would need to qualify without my income. They would not. Then I turned to Vanessa. "The vehicle I co-signed for is already 2 payments behind. I reported the missed payments this morning." Her face went pale. "You cannot do that." "I already did." Mom gripped the edge of the counter. "What about the utilities?" "They will remain active for 1 week. After that, billing must be transferred to one of you." They stared at me as though I had announced I was burning down the house. In reality, I was only stopping myself from paying to maintain it. Then I told them the truth I had deliberately kept secret. "This is not the only property in Seattle connected to me." Dad narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" "I bought a condo downtown. Vanessa stared. When? Months ago. With what money? My money. The question exposed her immediately. She had not asked whether I was happy. She wanted to know what resources had escaped her. It is fully paid for, I continued. Nobody has access except me. Mom's voice dropped. You bought property here and did not tell us? I knew what would happen if I did. Dad scoffed. You think you are better than us now. No. I think I finally have something that belongs only to me. Erin returned downstairs carrying a checklist. She explained that the visit would be documented as a warning. The home needed proper food storage, safer sleeping spaces, consistent supervision, and immediate cleanup. She would return. If these conditions do not improve, she said, looking directly at Vanessa, the next visit may involve additional intervention. Vanessa said nothing. Erin left. I finally moved my suitcase away from the doorway. The entire family stood in the wreckage of a vacation that no longer existed. Since my condo was still mostly unfurnished, I said I would remain at the house for 2 nights. Dad looked at me with open contempt. No. I thought I had misunderstood. What? You humiliated us. You are not welcome here. Mom did not defend me. Vanessa had disappeared upstairs with the children. The message was painfully clear. They had wanted my money. They had wanted my labor. They had wanted my obedience. But they had never truly wanted me. I nodded once, picked up my suitcase, and walked outside. That night, I entered my downtown condo alone. The floors were cold. The refrigerator was empty. There were no sheets on the bed, but the silence belonged to me, and nobody else had a key. The first night in my condo felt strange. There was no television mounted on the wall, no dining table, and no real bed yet. I slept on a mattress still wrapped in plastic with one blanket and a pillow I had bought from a convenience store on the way over. But the quiet was perfect. For the first time in years, I was responsible for nobody except myself. The next morning, I made coffee in a paper cup and sat by the window watching traffic move below. Snow dusted the rooftops, and the city looked almost peaceful from 10 floors up. Around 11, my phone buzzed. Vanessa, I want to come over alone. I am not trying to fight. I need to apologize. I stared at the message. A minute later, another appeared. 5 minutes. Please. I should have said this years ago. I waited before sending the address. An hour later, I saw her standing outside the building in a gray hoodie, arms folded against the cold. She looked smaller without our parents behind her. No makeup. No phone glued to her hand. No children pulling at her sleeves. Just my sister. I let her in. The moment she entered the condo, she stopped and looked around at the clean walls, new couch, and neatly stacked boxes. This is really nice, she said. She sounded surprised. I poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. Vanessa sat down carefully, like she was waiting for permission. I am sorry, she said. There was no dramatic build-up. She apologized for planning to leave the children with me without asking. She apologized for laughing when I arrived, and for treating every request for money like something I owed her. We got used to you fixing everything, she admitted. Mom and Dad expected it, and then I started expecting it too. I listened without interrupting. When you stopped, she continued, everything got ugly because none of us knew how to function without you. I appreciate you saying that. Her shoulders loosened slightly. But an apology does not fix anything unless your behavior changes. I know. She told me she had taken the children to a hotel and did not plan to return to our parents' house that night. She was looking for work and considering getting her own apartment. You should, I said. Before leaving, Vanessa thanked me. There was no hug and no promise that I wondered whether something had finally changed. At 7:30 that evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Dad's voice filled the apartment. If you think this is over, you are more foolish than I thought. You wanted to humiliate this family. You will learn how that feels. I listened twice. The threat was calm, which made it worse. Dad was not grieving the relationship. He was furious that he had lost control. I did not call him back. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Reclaim. Inside were copies of every wire transfer, mortgage payment, utility charge, credit card payment, grocery order, and emergency expense I had covered. Years of proof. The next morning, I visited the mortgage lender and completed the formal process of removing myself from future responsibility for the house. I did not want the property. I wanted them to own every late payment, interest charge, warning letter, and consequence. Back at the condo, I canceled 3 scheduled transfers: groceries, Mom's phone plan, Vanessa's car insurance, 2 clicks each. Then Mom sent a long message about how families should never be transactional. I did not answer. A group text followed from Dad, Mom, and Vanessa, accusing me of betraying them after everything they had supposedly sacrificed. They still did not understand. I was not punishing them for a misunderstanding. I was ending a system. 3 months earlier, I had submitted documentation to a government housing program asking for a review of financial assistance being used in a household with multiple adults and dependent children. I included proof of the money I contributed and evidence that the children were sometimes left unsupervised while my income subsidized the household. The request triggered an internal audit. That afternoon, my parents received the official letter. Housing assistance, child-related support, and disability benefits were now under review. At 10:23 that night, Vanessa sent one word. Why? I looked at it for a long time, because they had flown me across the country to babysit their disaster. And all I had done was return responsibility to the people who created it. By the final week of December, the silence became almost unsettling. No calls, no messages, no frantic demands from Dad, no guilt-filled essays from Mom. Even Vanessa stopped reaching out. I knew better than to mistake silence for peace. In my family, silence usually meant they were regrouping, searching for another angle. I kept unpacking. Furniture arrived. I bought groceries, sheets, dishes, and a small dining table that faced the window. Every object I placed in the condo felt like proof that I could build something without them. Then, one evening, someone knocked on my door. It was not loud or aggressive. Just 3 quiet taps. I checked the camera before opening it. Mom stood alone in the hallway wearing a heavy coat. Her eyes were red, but not with the wild panic I had seen at the house. She looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered slowly. Her gaze moved over the furnished living room, the clean kitchen, and the city lights beyond the window. She did not sit. "They received the letter," she said. "I know. The benefits review is official." I waited. Vanessa's car was repossessed this morning. Her voice cracked. "Your father has spent 2 days calling friends, asking for loans. Nobody will help. That is not my responsibility." "I know." The words surprised me. Mom turned toward the window. "I came alone because your father would only make things worse. He is furious." "At me?" "At everything." She looked back at me. "But mostly because you left so cleanly." I frowned. "He expected shouting. He expected you to come back after a few days. He thought you would feel guilty." He was wrong. "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked a question I had never expected. "What do we do now?" Not "how could you do this?" Not "you ruined us." Just "what do we do now?" I answered honestly. "You start over." Her shoulders lowered. "You live within your income. You stop pretending someone else will rescue you. Vanessa finds work. Dad deals with the mortgage. You transfer the bills into your own names." She nodded slowly. "And if you ever want me in your life again, I come back as a daughter, not as an account number." Mom looked down. "I understand." I was not sure she truly did, but at least she was listening. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check. It was nowhere near what they owed me, but it was real. "This is all we can repay right now," she said. "We will send more when we can." I placed it on the counter. Mom did not apologize. Maybe she still could not. Before leaving, she whispered, "Take care of yourself." Then she walked out. I stood by the door for a long time after it closed. The visit did not erase anything, but it was the first time Mom had entered my home without asking for money, a favor, or access. Weeks passed. I never saw Dad again. Vanessa remained silent for nearly 3 months. Then one morning, an email arrived from her. There was no long explanation, only a photograph. She stood outside a small apartment building, with both children beside her. Each child held part of a key ring. Behind them was a faded blue door and a narrow balcony. The message beneath the photo read, "New place. I found work. Thank you, even if you hate me." I stared at the words. I did not hate Vanessa. Hate required a kind of energy I no longer wanted to give. Still, I waited several weeks before responding. Then I took a picture of the Seattle skyline from my living room window. Under it, I wrote one sentence. "No hate, just boundaries." She did not reply. She did not need to. That exchange became the closest thing we had to reconciliation. There were no dramatic hugs, no promises that the family would return to normal. Normal had been the problem. What we needed was something new, something quieter, something where helping was a choice instead of an obligation. I still did not trust them. Trust required more than one check, one apartment, or one apology. But for the first time, they were solving their own problems. And for the first time, I was allowing them to. A little more than a month passed after everything finally settled. Or maybe it was more accurate to say that my life had finally begun. The condo no longer felt temporary. The boxes were gone. My clothes were where I wanted them. The refrigerator held actual food instead of bottled water and takeout containers. The mattress had sheets. The windows had curtains, and the room slowly began reflecting a version of me that had spent years waiting for permission to exist. I woke up without fear. That was the biggest change. For years, seeing my family's names on my phone had created an immediate pressure in my chest. A call from Dad meant criticism. A message from Mom meant guilt. A text from Vanessa usually meant money. Now, most mornings began quietly. Coffee, snow against the window, traffic moving far below, no emergencies waiting for me. One afternoon, I checked the mail and found another envelope without a return address. I recognized Mom's handwriting immediately. Inside was another check. It was small, almost symbolic, compared with what I had spent over the years. Beneath it was a short note. "We are doing everything we can." I read the sentence twice. Then I placed the check beside the first one. I had not cashed either. It was not because I wanted to punish her. I was waiting to see whether the effort continued after the immediate shame faded. My family had always been good at temporary change. They apologized when frightened. They made promises when consequences arrived. Then, once someone rescued them, everything returned to normal. I was not interested in another brief performance. I wanted consistency. Vanessa seemed to understand that. She found part-time work at a daycare center, which surprised me at first. Then I realized it probably suited her more than she expected. Caring for other children under supervision forced her to follow routines, show up on time, and pay attention. She sent me occasional photographs. The first showed the children sitting on a rug in their new living room. Coloring books covered the floor. There was a second-hand couch, a small television, and a paper snowflake taped crookedly to the wall. The apartment was modest, but the children looked calm. There was no tension behind their smiles. Another photo showed Vanessa wearing a work badge and standing outside the daycare. Her message said only, "First full week." I replied with a simple, "Good." That was all. No emotional reunion, no promises that I would begin paying again. Short messages, quiet updates, peace instead of closeness. That was what I wanted. As for Dad, there was nothing. No call. No apology. Not even another threat. For a while, I expected him to find a new way to reach me. I imagined letters, relatives sent to confront me, or another attempt to show up at the condo. Nothing came. People like my father rarely apologized because an apology required admitting that control had never been love. He was probably still waiting for the world to bend back toward him. I had stopped bending. One evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea while snow fell over Seattle. The flakes moved through the city lights, slow and almost weightless. Then, something strange happened. I laughed. Not because of a joke. Not because I had received good news. I laughed because nothing was happening. Nobody needed money. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was asking me to repair a crisis they had created. The silence around me was complete. For most of my life, silence had meant something bad was coming. Now it meant I was safe. I thought back to the morning Dad called and begged me to come home for the holidays. His voice had sounded warm enough to convince me that maybe the family wanted me there. After a 6-hour flight, I had learned the truth. They did not want Bridget, the daughter and sister. They wanted Bridget, the babysitter. Bridget, the mortgage payment. Bridget, the emergency fund. Bridget, the woman who always arrived prepared to solve everything. The moment I refused that role, the family treated me like an enemy. But stepping away did not destroy them. It exposed them. Vanessa finally found work because I stopped paying for her avoidance. Mom began sending repayment checks because I stopped accepting excuses. The children moved into a safer home because someone finally forced their mother to take responsibility. Even Dad's silence became a kind of answer. He could not control me anymore, so he had nothing to say. I eventually deposited the first 2 checks. Not because the money mattered, because accepting repayment was different from accepting guilt. Mom continued sending small amounts every month. Sometimes she included a short note. She never asked for anything in return. That consistency did not erase the past, but it showed effort. Vanessa and I remained cautious. Months later, she asked whether the children could visit me for an afternoon. This time, she asked several weeks in advance. She gave me the exact times, emergency information, food preferences, and permission to say no. I agreed. When they arrived, Vanessa carried their bags inside and looked around the condo. "No surprise vacation," she said quietly. It was an awkward joke, but it was also an acknowledgement. "No surprise anything," I replied. She nodded. When she returned later, the children ran to her, and she thanked me before leaving. No request followed. That mattered more than any apology. My family did not become perfect. There was no magical reunion around a holiday table. Dad remained absent. Mom and I spoke occasionally. Vanessa and I rebuilt something that might one day resemble a relationship, but none of them had access to my bank accounts, my property, or my peace. That boundary remained permanent. I once believed closure meant hearing every person admit exactly how they had hurt me. Now I knew better. Sometimes closure was an empty apartment becoming a home. Sometimes it was seeing your family solve problems you once believed only you could fix. Sometimes it was watching snow fall from a 10th floor window and realizing your phone could ring without frightening you. I did not get the family holiday Dad promised. I got something better. Distance. Choice. A life that finally belonged to me. And after everything, that quiet was worth more than any apology they could have offered.